Welcome to Keiser Voices, the story of success, brought to you by Keiser University Graduate School, here where the academic world meets personal triumph. Join us today as we dive into the captivating tales of success.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Keiser. I'm the Vice Chancellor of the Graduate School. It's great to be with you all on another episode of the Graduate School's podcast for Keiser University Voices. The topic that I'm going to discuss today is the state of higher education and the future of higher education based on the trends that we are seeing today. Well, there are a number of factors that I believe are part of the diverse canvas that makes up higher education. And I'll go through those topics and then explain what I believe are the natural outcomes related to those stimuli. So the first question that I think is really at the top of mind, and it certainly gets a lot of play in the national media in the United States, is the concept and the question of student financing and student loan debt and forgiveness. What I think that is an offshoot of the reality that post-secondary education and the sticker price for tuition has increased at a dramatic rate, and a rate that far exceeds the ability of the average American consumer to pay for higher education. Additionally, embedded within the psyche of the American population is the concept that upward mobility and social mobility is predicated on the ability for students to seek education, achieve higher degrees, gain tangible skills that are skills tangible to the workforce, and become excellent practitioners and scholars. And I do believe that is true. The challenge is that it's getting harder every single day for the middle class and lower class American to pay for quality higher education. So where does that leave us? That leaves us in a situation that's very polarized. There are individuals in the American political system that believe that student debt is caused by the institutions of higher education, that the spending at these institutions are out of control, and really it's the inefficient business practice that's causing the cost. There are those that believe that cost has increased for every industry and expenses continue to increase, especially when demands for services from higher education institutions continue to increase, where it used to be it was just enough to study a trade or an occupation or an academic discipline, but now it's expected that there are fraternities and sororities and sports teams and clubs and all these avocational pursuits that cause expenses to increase dramatically. Additionally, there's the concept of state budgets being constricted, enrollment declining, which is causing financial strain on many of the institutions of post-secondary ed. And that is true. Many of the private liberal arts institutions and many of the private proprietary or for-profit institutions have recently closed because of financial concerns. But at the heart of it is a desire and a need for higher education and the concern on the American population of whether they can pay for it. So I think what you will definitely see, and you continue to see, are higher education institutions becoming more responsive to demands for cost and ROI. So you definitely see calls for return on investment. You see calls from the American population for degrees that lead to occupation. The humanities, for example, are in question. And it was recently that West Virginia University and the West Virginia University system did away with most of their humanities profile and program portfolio. They got rid of the languages, which was a key hallmark of post-secondary education. But the thought process behind that is that it doesn't make sense for these students to pay $40,000, $50,000 a year to pursue a degree in Latin when that's not going to help you pay off your debt. So that's certainly a question. One of the things that most people don't realize is the majority of the debt that is associated with post-secondary educational attainment is at the graduate level. So at the graduate level, that is a question too, the return on investment, the cost of education, the cost of attendance. So I think that there is going to be a reckoning in post-secondary education when it comes to cost. And I don't think it's only for the private schools. That's really where the majority of the focus has been. is that there have been concerns that the private liberal arts, especially the prestigious liberal arts schools, are becoming schools only for the elite, because only the elite can qualify, not only from a GPA and board score perspective, but also the only ability for those families to pay for the tuition. But I also think public education is going to have to deal with the cost question, because at the end of the day, all taxpayers pay to go to public education institutions within their state, even if they don't attend. So one of the things I tell people and my prospective students a lot is that I pay every single day to go to University of Florida, but I never attended University of Florida because my tax dollars go directly to their educational budgets. And that's going to be called into question. The question, why is it still that these public schools continue every year to ask for more and more budget allocation and continue to charge higher and higher tuitions for both in-state and out-of-state students? But it doesn't seem that the cost dynamic is changing. So I think there is going to be a reckoning for public and private institutions alike. I think that there's going to need to be a responsiveness to tuition. I think part of that response is you will see institutions of higher education partnering with industry for tuition reimbursement opportunities to reduce the duration of time in school, where perhaps apprenticeship can reduce the need for clinical classes. Simulated technologies may reduce the need for in-person attendance. But I think there's going to be some industry-university partnerships that are predicated on the basis of not only reducing costs, but making education more pertinent to the workforce that they're entering. I think institutions like Keiser University, and of course I'm biased in this regard, so take this with a grain of salt, but I think we'll do very well within this context. And the reason being is these private not-for-profits or even private for-profits who focus on upskilling students and social mobility are really at the right time in history to demonstrate their value, because we do not have the classes, the gen eds that lead to no degrees. We don't have the additional fluff courses, so to say. Our curriculum is specifically tailored to developing a trade and developing a skill that you can pay back your student debt. We have always been focused on return on investment, and we've always been focused on upskilling and making our students practitioners. But that's not always been the case for higher education. Higher education really has predicated and found pride in its value by providing a holistic education, a well-rounded liberal arts education, but that's being called into question today. So I think the student finance aspect with the value of education is an enormous question mark within post-secondary education, and I think you're going to see some more cost consciousness. You're going to see some crackdowns on tuition increases at public schools. You're going to see some cutting of budget allocations from state governments to public schools. And you're going to see the reduction of program portfolios across the country, where a lot of the programs, and I do believe there is value, although I'm an individual that's a key executive and a key administrator at a institution that's career oriented and career focused, I still think there is value in the humanities and the liberal arts education. But because of the need for pragmatism in higher education when it comes to costs, I think you're going to see these program portfolios reduced significantly, and a lot of the humanities are going to be cut. A lot of the music classes, so they're going to be cut, and the classics are going to be cut. One of the other trends is the technological disruption. And there's a lot of question marks about that. AI, AR, VR, online education and the concept of OPMs, pedagogical modalities. That's going to really change higher education. And so let's start with AI. AI is at the top of everyone's mind nowadays, and the concept of machine learning and the concept of plagiarism is a really big concern in academia. With artificial intelligence, the advent of ChatGPT and other technologies, it's easier than ever to write. And the question becomes, is writing professionally going to be even a skill that is an attribute in the future? I tend to think that no, it won't be. So for much of human history, the ability to write well and articulate your thoughts in the written word has been an attribute that's really been left to the technocrats and intelligentsia of our society. And that's been able to be a clear-cut way to demonstrate your education. But with ChatGPT and artificial intelligence and generative AI, we are all excellent writers. And really prompting, asking the AI the right question is becoming the skill that most people will need. And that's just plagiarism. And that is just the ability to be able to receive an incredible quantity of information and for the AI to produce a product. So I think that plagiarism will be something to contend with, as it always has been, but for technological disruption. Additionally, I think what you're going to see is going to be pedagogical changes and changes in the theories associated with pedagogy. What AI has done, in my opinion, more than anything, is made the concept of memorization or rote memorization and regurgitation unnecessary and really a fool's errand when it comes to education. Meaning that we can no longer quiz students about what are the facts of a certain war or what is the tenets of a certain principle. Everyone can Google search, everyone can ask Siri, everyone can use generative AI to determine answers to questions really quickly. So just knowing data, knowing facts really isn't a skill. So there's going to be even greater emphasis on critical thinking and understanding concepts in a really in-depth manner than ever before. And I think from a pedagogical standpoint, you're going to see the need for teachers to stimulate critical thinking and change the way they teach, happening at K through 12 levels, where the question then becomes if critical thinking is reserved for K through 12, because again, memorization and regurgitation really do not provide any value anymore in the advent of computers and AI. What will higher education be? What will be the purpose of higher education and graduate education when really that has historically been the stimulation of critical thinking skills, the ability to ask the right questions, the ability to frame your thinking around a subject? What will be that next topic? So I think that pedagogy, what is taught in the classroom and how it's taught, will be revolutionized forever. And I do think AI is an existential threat to many of our teachers. And hopefully the professorate and the faculty take that very seriously and they challenge themselves to challenge their students like never before. AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality, I see a little bit differently. I see that as changing the modality of how students learn. Right now, you have face-to-face instruction, you have hybrid instruction, you have online instruction, you have competency-based and correspondence, but basically they're all derivatives of distance education. But what you'll have in the future with augmented reality and virtual reality is that face-to-face, tactile, hands-on experience is going to be transformed forever. I think it is in the very near future that students are going to be sent home with goggles. And this pen that I hold in my hand right here is no longer a pen, but it's a scalpel. And I could be sitting at home with my goggles on and in an augmented reality setting where I look as if I'm performing a surgery. And I'm learning in a classroom setting with my colleagues surrounding me, but I'm actually just at home. And that could be done virtual reality, or it could go to the next level where you're actually interacting with your physical environment, and the physical environment is becoming part of the virtual environment, which is augmented reality. So I think those technologies are going to transform the way that teaching occurs and the locations that it occurs. And that provides many traditional universities a real tough challenge, which is the concept of university in this country has been really the land grant sprawling campus model, where you go to a campus that's in a remote place that has hundreds of acres. That goes back to your cost question, is that something that is even feasible in the future with the maintenance and the upkeep that is required of maintaining these facilities and this real estate investment. But then also, why do students need to go to these sprawling campuses to learn if a lot of the work that they're going to do in the future is going to be remote or hybrid, or that the technology is going to be so good that anything you could simulate in person, and the majority of what you can simulate in person, can be done at home? And that's a real interesting question. The real estate question of higher education is closely tied to technological disruption. And you see that in other industries. For example, in the retail industry, malls are becoming defunct. And what are malls becoming? They're becoming distribution centers for online retail like Amazon. And I'm wondering if something similar will happen with higher education, where the physical assets and the sprawling campuses that all these universities have really become antiquated and things of the past. Or will we continue to send our students to these campuses with the concept that we need to help them transform from adolescence into adulthood by having this almost sleepaway camp experience? I don't know, because the question with the whole maturation and finding oneself, which a lot of Americans have put a lot of value in, and I think there's value. I certainly had that experience when I went to George Washington. It was beneficial to me. Is a question, will they pay for it anymore? And with technology, is it something that they're going to even want, the parents and the families of the students that go? So I think AR, AI, VR is going to have a dramatic impact on higher education, and it's going to really transform a relatively antiquated industry. And if you really think about it, pedagogy has not transformed very much. If you look at the way classroom instruction is done today, and you go back to the ancient Greece, Socrates and Aristotle teaching in caves, it's still Socratic method. It's still Q&A. It's still lecture based. It's still a physical discussion about a topic. And there may or may not be any technology. Maybe a PowerPoint is what's different than the writings on the wall of a cave, but that's about it. And I think that's going to change very dramatically for higher education. When I mentioned OPMs, I think that's a real question mark. And I think that accreditors and legislators are getting wise to online education is necessary for the advancement of the American population. However, online education, like any education, is not universally the same, and quality varies significantly. When we had the pandemic, every institution in America had to move online. Whether or not they had the capability, they had to move online. And vast resources through the HERF funds and the CARES Act were poured into higher education to subsidize that transition and that transformation. What we found out was many of the traditional universities do not have the capability to run their own online courses, and they outsourced much of that education. And that's really the OPM model, where the education, the facilitation of the course shells and the instructional design and much of what makes online education is conducted by a private business that is paid by a university. And what the universities are simply doing are credentialing the faculty. But the question is, are they really having academic oversight over the courses? Are those faculty truly loyal to the University of Michigan or whatever university it may be? Or do they see themselves as being loyal to BISC or some of the other OPM providers, because ultimately that's the entity that's doing most, if not all, the management? And you saw this also take a different derivative when you saw a lot of the traditional universities acquiring the for-profit colleges like Kaplan, like University of Phoenix, where Purdue Global, basically took an online school that was for profit and outsourced all their distance education to the online school, because the traditional universities were not and are not prepared to operate in this multimodality environment. And whether it's the OPMs or doing outsourcing by acquisition, I think the quality of online education is going to be looked at very dramatically. And there's also precedent for a crackdown on academic quality. Again, Americans like never before, in my opinion, are questioning the value of education. Enrollment is down basically on a 10-year trend, and that's data that I received from the Lumina Foundation and Gallup, that declining enrollment is rampant across this country. Additionally, there's a gender gap in enrollment data. Men are not going to post-secondary education like they used to. Women are the ones that are making up the enrollment dearth. And at the end of the day, both Hispanics and women are going to school in record numbers, but they're not making up the enrollment declines. And part of the reason that there's declines in enrollment is because the American population is questioning, is it worth it to pay this much money to get a degree that doesn't lead to any tangible skill? And with that being said, the accreditors are getting a lot of pressure because the legislators are getting frustrated that graduates do not have tangible skills, are not contributing to the workforce, not supporting labor statistics. And they're saying, how could this happen? Institutional accreditors, you are the gatekeepers of academic quality in Title IV. We expect you to hold the schools accountable. So accreditation is getting much tougher. Programmatic accreditation, or the accreditors who accredit the program-specific situations, are getting tougher. And the need for assessment, or the ability to prove via documentation that continuous improvement is occurring and learning outcomes are occurring, is becoming much more stringent. So there's a hyper-vigilance that exists in post-secondary education to demonstrate and prove its quality. And the online environment is where I think the greatest need is for that hypervigilance for academic quality. And I think that day is coming. And I think there's a reckoning that's coming. I think that they're going to find, the auditors, the accreditors, the legislators, that many universities who are not like Keiser University, spending enormous resources investing in their own instructional design, hiring their own faculty, training their own faculty to teach in an online environment, but they're outsourcing it, are not providing the academic quality that their brand suggests. So I think that's going to be something that is going to be a trend in higher ed and something to focus on in the future. I think you will continue to see the closure of many small private liberal arts and for-profit colleges for many of the reasons that I said: declining enrollment, the question about cost is going to contribute continuously to the declining enrollment. The question about program portfolios and whether there's return on investment about getting a degree in art history is going to continue to shutter a lot of the small private liberal arts schools. Questions about taxing endowment. That's an existential threat to many of the small private liberal arts colleges that are reliant on endowment and the money that it provides to keep them afloat. If they are to, make endowment regulation much more stringent, or to tax it as the Trump administration has suggested, that's going to be a very hard outcome financially for a lot of these institutions. I think also there's a demographic question that needs to be answered, both on what are our priorities as American educators. One of the things that I think is really concerning is that the institutions that are ranked top 50 in U.S. News and World Report, which is the preeminent ranking for post-secondary education quality, although I'm not a huge fan of the ranking system, those schools are schools for the elite. Those schools are schools for students who have 4.0 GPAs, perfect SATs, and are well-financed. Yes, with the desire to increase DEI and diversity, these schools, and that's what they got in trouble for with the Supreme Court case associated with affirmative action. Schools like Harvard realized that they couldn't be as diverse as they wanted to be unless they went to a quota-based admission system where they were cherry-picking certain ethnicities to provide a greater representation of what America, air quote, looks like. But the reality is, unless you're going to jerry-rig the process to advantage a certain demographic so that you can have it represented within your university, these schools are becoming more and more exclusive. They are not training the average American. And then the question becomes, well, is that what the community colleges want to do? Well, in Florida, I can say that the community colleges don't want to do that. The community colleges want to become what they have become, state colleges. And what are state colleges? Community colleges that offer degree level programming. They want to become more prestigious. They want to enroll students who are going to provide them better outcomes. They want to be more selective. They want to be more rigorous. So one of the questions I think that the American education administration decision makers and the professor need to ask is, what is the purpose of American post-secondary education? I'm one to believe that the hallmark of a great school is not that it takes it's not that it takes students who are elite students, both academically and financially, and helps them find jobs at Goldman Sachs. I don't think that's the hallmark of a great school. I think the hallmark of a great school is taking students who are blue-collar students, helping them transform into great-collar laborers, great-collar students, and helping them transform into white-collar laborers, practitioners, and researchers. But that when they leave your institution, they are experiencing all the benefits of social mobility because they gained something tangible. That's what I believe the vision for higher education should be. Unfortunately, my colleagues at a lot of these prestigious institutions do not see it that way. Another couple questions, with the time permitting, that I think post-secondary education is going to deal with, and the trends, is the politicization of higher education. We just went through a very watermark situation in post-secondary history with the congressional hearing of the presidents of MIT, Penn, and Harvard. And now we had the resignations of some of my colleagues at Harvard and Penn. And that was because of the politicization of higher education. And why do you say that? You could say, well, of course, the responses from Dr. Gay and her colleagues were reprehensible, which I agree. It should be very easy to condemn any form of discrimination. There shouldn't be tolerance for any of that. And I think that they really got into a very complex situation when the answer should have been very straightforward and very easy. And that's what the American population and the alumni demanded, and the donors demanded, was a straightforward answer to a simple question. But I think what really is happening is that higher education has got into a habit of virtue signaling. When societal situations occur, higher education is one of the first industries to say, this is what we believe in, this is what we stand for, and we condemn the other side. I think the concern and the potential damage associated with that is that if you are going to pick sides in a political and social debate, one, there's a good chance at some point you'll be wrong, and that will get you in trouble. Two, political and social situations change. They're not static. And again, you're likely to be wrong because you might have been right in that moment, and you might have been judging the sentiment of the American population and the American legislature well in that moment, but perhaps more information has come to light, and you seem to be, now you have what has turned to be a different situation. But additionally, the virtue signaling, or the articulation of values, which a lot of modern institutions want to do, is not only endemic in higher education, it's also endemic in many industries, is because the thought is you want to demonstrate that you have a moral code, and that those students and those faculty that work for you and attend your institution believe in the values that your institution believes in. The problem with it all, though, however, is that not everyone sees the world the same. And once you start putting out your values, you become a political lightning rod. And that is certainly happening with the Ivy League. You see it in Florida with Governor DeSantis viewing whether right or wrong. And all this is up for debate. And I'm not passing judgment on what is right or what is wrong. I'm just simply calling a phenomena to the mat that I see. and bringing light to a phenomena that is part and parcel a challenge for higher education. But when Governor DeSantis is looking at the curricula of higher educational institutions, looking at the fabric of the professorate and the makeup of the professorate and the administrators, and saying they're too liberal and they're rewriting history, that's politicizing higher education. So will we find ourselves, and I hope not, where Hillsdale College will be juxtaposed to, let's just say for argument's sake, Harvard's a very liberal institution. Hillsdale College is juxtaposed to Harvard, or Liberty is juxtaposed to MIT. Will students start picking institutions based on their political leanings? Will higher education institutions become more political in nature because of the prevailing values and beliefs of the faculty and the administrators? And I think that would be a horrible outcome. I hope that does not happen, because in my mind, one of the main purposes of post-secondary education is that regardless of what you believe in, this is a safe haven for you to debate the merits of your beliefs. And that there should not be a preference or a bias or prevailing thought when it comes to these controversial topics. It is simply indifference and objectivity and a completely psychologically safe environment where no one is right, but no one is wrong, but that you're able to critically think through these issues. But unfortunately, it is looking like the least of politicians who are going to, push forward a lot of the sentiment in American society that there are liberal institutions and there are conservative institutions, and that the institutions of higher education are becoming centers of indoctrination, whether it's for conservative principles or liberal principles. And I think that's a very dangerous thing for post-secondary education, and I would advise against it to my colleagues. And they may criticize me and say, well, if you stand for nothing, then you stand for everything, and you have no moral fiber. I would say to them that it is not my role to articulate for an entire institution and a diverse population what we believe. I actually believe that what I stand for is I believe in the ability to have a psychologically safe environment where people can debate and they can muddle through their arguments so that they can find their truth. But I am really interested about concepts like DEI, concepts like supporting social causes. Will that transform the pedagogy? Will that transform the brand reputations of institutions where we're going to polarize our society even more, where conservatives go to certain schools and liberals go and Democrats go to other schools? And I certainly hope not. But I think that is a question mark. And then a final question mark for the demographic of higher education in some of the fringes: where are the men? Where are the men? Because the men are not enrolling in post-secondary education. Now, the men are more likely to be represented in some of the vocational trades like CDL and mechanical engineering and things of that nature. But there is a significant dearth and diminishing trend in the enrollment of men. Women are going to college and going to graduate school, but men are not. As I mentioned, there is a growing emphasis on the value of vocational and technical education, apprenticeships, online programs, boot camps, and these hands-on learning experiences outside of maybe the allied health field draw a lot more men. But still, men in general are going to college less and less and less. And if you're looking at the trends, quantitative subjects are leading to more international students, and enrollment in general are leading to more women. So the demographics of the students who are attending university are changing very dramatically. Um, some good, some bad perhaps, but ultimately changing. And what does that mean for faculty? What does that mean for administrators? And what does that mean for the workforce? Are we going to have high unemployment for men if they're not attending college? And one of the things I wonder about is that 1 in 5 men in this country have a job associated with driving. Well, with the advent of AI and self-driving cars and self-driving vehicles like planes, will a lot of those occupations go away, and will unemployment be very much a gender-specific dynamic? So those, whether it be cost, whether it be a spotlight on academic quality, a spotlight on ROI and pragmatism and program choices, financial concerns for the institutions, demographic changes, changes in just technological disruption and the impact on pedagogy. I think those are the trends that I'm looking at in post-secondary ed and trying to make an observation of where we may be in the future. And I think one thing is certain, that the future is uncertain, but what is certain is that it's going to change, and I believe higher education is going to go through a revolution. I do not think this is just, oh yes, higher education has had winds of change before and it's always navigated. No, I think the American population is really concerned about our capitalization rate, or to define capitalization rate, our ability to take our talent, our raw talent, and transform that into contributing members of society and of the workforce. And are we taking advantage of the talent that exists in this country, and the quality of the education, and the accessibility of the education? I think Americans are genuinely concerned, and I think there are genuine challenges within post-secondary ed that people will have to work to reconcile. So that is my take on the state of higher education and the future of higher education. For those of you who are regular viewers of the podcast, I certainly encourage you to reach out to me. I would love to talk about this topic. This is something that is absolutely fascinating to me. And I will tell you, I absolutely do not believe that I know anything definitively. I have strong opinions on many things, but I can't be persuaded. And I would love to have an intellectual debate related to some of the items that I mentioned. With that being said, again, I'm Robert Keiser. I'm the Vice Chancellor of the Graduate School for Keiser University, and the opinions I articulated are completely mine and don't represent the views of the institution. And I encourage you to continue to sign on for Keiser Voices and be regular members of the podcast. You all take care.
Thank you for journeying with us today on Keiser Voices, the story of success. As we close this chapter, remember, every story has its next page.